20 games or 20 rounds of footy, plus the opening round down, boys, and we have never seen a season like this ever. Never in my time in football have we seen this season unfold in the manner that it has, and it's great for us, it's great for the supporters. Not so great for the supporters of some clubs, but the come-from-nowhere stories that are just emerging, and those that have been sitting atop the ladder are just starting to stumble. It's unbelievable.
Well, it's definitely the longest season we've ever endured, which means that every side has time for a slump.
Yeah, we're fight out of it.
We're going to just and maybe even a comeback. So there's still plenty of time.
Well, the Premiership favourites, Brisbane or equal Premiership favourites, have fought their way out of a slump, but it happened very early in the season, Gaz.
I know. Well, let's have a look at the Premiership. The ladder now, which we do every week. Normally you just give it a bit of scan attention, particularly at this time of the year where it's normally settled and we're thinking about positions inside the 8. It's far from, all of a sudden, and we'll talk about the Bombers obviously, Hawthorn and the Western Bulldogs. Let's go to the form ladder, which is more relevant. So this is the ladder for the whole season. The form ladder we decided to have a look at and take us back from round 12 to 20, and this is where the really interesting part lies. So the form teams, the Brisbanes, the Hawthorns, Fremantles and the Western Bulldogs and the rest of all, St Kilda have had a good run in recent times, were great on the weekend.
In good form there. Look at Sydney goes 9th on that form ladder, so it's amazing. Isn't it? 4 or 5 weeks ago was Sydney by how far at the end of the season, and then of course Essendon 15th on the ladder, so everyone's singing their praise and getting ready for September. Well, things are wobbling there, so it's been interesting to watch.
Sydney's percentage still 121. So, I mean, they've lost those three
Close
of those
games.
last 4 by less than a goal. But yeah, it does tell a bit of a story, doesn't it?
Which takes us to the much anticipated Premiership window. They want it every week. We can't do it every week because it just takes over social media everywhere. We can only do it once
a
a
lot of
month.
suspense, Gary.
Of course it does.
I was surprised you're not doing a walk and talk tonight. You know, we've had a bit of a spell for a while.
I threw it up but got shot down. So this is teams that are top 6 for points scored, top 6 for points conceded. They are in the right-hand top window. The green is the Premiership window. So I think 18 of the last 20 premiers have been in that spot there. Every single premier has been top 6 for defence, which is above the line. So let's just unpack it. The Western Bulldogs, when no one wanted to know about the Western Bulldogs, when the coach was going to get sacked, they couldn't play, there was trouble everywhere. The Premiership window stood tall and said, no, don't dismiss them because they were in the window.
Well, I think for belief purposes, I think Bevo may have been showing his boys.
I doubt that he hasn't.
I think you're saying doubt that he has. So maybe he got up there and presented.
I think so.
Round 4, round 8.
There's still believers out there.
Did you see Gary last night on the couch, boys? We're still in the hunt.
I think so.
No, it's been good. The other 2 teams that are close watching, well, you wouldn't say Fremantle have been sleepers, but GWS and Fremantle just on the edge. They're the only 2 teams, Gaz, that can still make the Premiership window.
That's a good point. So if you're a Carlton fan, you're a Geelong fan, they are in exactly the wrong spot at the moment. They are down outside of certainly under the line. Offensively going okay, not so good defensively.
Hawthorn and GWS might just be able to pop above the line, which...
They could ruin the window.
So Hawthorn could. Hawthorn could.
But they're sneaking ever closer. So anyway, it's a season like no other.
Did Sydney declare... did the footy world declare that it's Sydney's to lose or declare them too early? So, and you've got to think, well, 3 weeks ago, you'd be forgiving for coming up with that assumption. So 3 weeks ago, 3 games clear. Now, 1.5 games clear on top of the ladder, guys. Lost 4 out of the last 5, and teams are really going to work on Sydney, clearly, as you think they would have done. And they're just having issues at the moment. They're being forced to play a different way. So you actually look at that. They're forced to play a long down the line game, which doesn't suit them. They like to keep the ball moving by foot, by leg speed. Look at that. Round zip to round 15, 27%. Since then, they've been forced to play long down the line as the numbers go up. Also, teams are now going to work on taking the corridor away. Yep. They're really aware of this. If we look at this footage, really aware, coming up against Sydney, do not give them the corridor at all costs. Forwards are right up there. Midfielders are crunching up the centre of the ground. So just have a look at these Adams. Adams, desperately wants to get back in there. Thinks he can go the fame, get back in. Now look at that, there's a smother attempt ready. So the guys in close proximity are switched on, ready to go. We saw it the week before as well, Bucks, against the Brisbane Lions.
Yeah, and this is standard defence, to guard the corridor. But what Sydney were doing really well early in the year is that they were just moving the ball so fast. As soon as they got it on turnover, they were bang, they were out. Now, they'd change angle and then they would just run and carry and you just wouldn't be able to stop them. So they've been slowed. they're not changing the angle or getting out to fat side as much as they were, and they're being forced long down the line. So that makes them easier to defend, which means that sides coming back the other way are scoring more heavily on them.
Yeah, it's interesting, Bucks, in it, because it sort of goes hand in hand, and I feel like Oppo teams are now coming up against them and prepared to attack them in a straight line. We've seen Brisbane and Western Bulldogs 2 weeks in a row, especially early in games when it's freshest in the players' minds, to just keep going in a straight line. Now, look at where all Sydney's resources have to get deployed. They get pulled out of the corridor where they're most comfortable, where they want to be able to attack Bucks. And look at all those numbers there. There seems to be an imbalance when you actually look at the Bulldogs players back on the inside.
Well, the chasing efforts there by the Sydney players, Goulden first and then Florent later, was pretty good. But what Bulldogs have done is they've lengthened down the skinny side, they've lengthened down the skinny end, and they've still got a fat side winger who's there to slide and be involved. So, and we saw Brisbane. This is Sydney getting a dose of their own medicine. So if you swap the Guernseys, that's what we were seeing early in the season.
Absolutely. And you look at the winger, they're so dependent on their winger, their fat or open side winger, it's Campbell in this case on the top left-hand of the screen, to get back and support their defence. We know they've been weak, and Malikan injured on the weekend, Rampy wasn't there, get back and support. So I just feel as if teams are trying to pull them apart offensively as well, Gaz, so they don't have their numbers in the corridor to go back the other way. And it's really hurt their offensive turnover game.
Sit out in front, sit on top of the ladder for this long, you're going to get picked apart, aren't you? At some stage. I mean, they've been there, so clubs have to go to work on how they play. And you've enunciated, I'm sure most of the footy world are sitting there going, well, this is how they play. And now it's getting taken away from them.
Yeah.
And they're vulnerable at both ends. Their defenders are vulnerable.
Yeah, they are,
Malikan out, Rampy out. They've got Tom McCartan, who haven't got an intercept defender.
Yeah.
And their forwards get marked against.
Yeah.
It was a disgrace on the weekend. The way they
Absolutely. And they've been turning the ball over in the back half as well, Gaz. So we won't show vision on that, but are they unforced errors? Well, maybe they're not so much now, Gaz. Maybe it's they're getting forced in the head because they're pressuring themselves to get it in the corridor.
But Sydney will go back to contests and D. They'll work in the contest and they'll work in transition, and you know that's their DNA. So I think they've got a way to fight themselves.
They'll grind away.
They will grind away.
In for the grind.
Absolutely.
They will be. So if we flip the season around, so the Western Bulldogs are now, on this run, similar to what we saw earlier in the year. So does that make them premiership favourites? I mean, I know it's tongue in cheek, and
they weren't in the 8 until
they've just snuck their nose into the 8. But in terms of form-wise, all of a sudden them and Hawthorn, if they were doing that at the start of the year, we'd be doing our nut going, who's going to beat them?
Well, the structure of their team, it looks like, we spoke about their spine last week. Yep. Obviously, they've got a dominant midfield, so that bodes well for a premiership run, doesn't it?
Yeah, and they're defending turnover beautifully on the weekend. And these numbers here, 149 turnovers over the last 2 weeks. They've conceded 6 goals. Normally, that's over 100 points. If you turn the footy over 149 times, you normally expect, on average, to give up over 100 points. They've given away 6 goals.
Well, they look like they put teams to sleep. They put Geelong to sleep. They put Sydney to sleep. And I think the 2 elements that we spoke about, their pressure on ball. So unheralded, Vandermeer, McNeil, Garcia. These players have put great pressure on the ball, and they've got an intercept game behind it.
They have now, and this is in the first 2 minutes of the game. This is to further your point. So you talk about how can they not get scored against on turnover. So this is in the first 2 minutes. Flip this around. They got the first 3 blokes at the drop of the footy, right? They're beautifully set up on the spare side, and they've got numbers through the middle. Now, Jamar ends up taking the mark, but that's the sort of look that teams are looking at when they're trying to turn the footy over and go back the other way. So it was 149 turnovers, 6 goals. Blows your mind.
It's not abnormal to be in shape like that, for every team to be in shape like that. The trick is to do it when there's been 2 or 3 transitions, you're that well drilled that you know where you need to be and that you're communicating with each other to maintain your shape in defence. And the Bulldogs at the moment look as sharp as any team.
Nice to have it at the opening 2 minutes. I'd imagine in the coaching box.
I've been listening during the week, Gaz.
They're in good shape here, boys.